All right, hey everyone, this is Gabriel Menchaca. We're doing a new podcast today. I'm actually going to be interviewing somebody that we became acquainted with and has come over a few times, and we've learned a lot from her. And so I'd like to introduce you all to Sierra.
Hello.
Why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background. Let's start off with this. Where are you from?
So I'm originally from the small sunny beach town of Santa Barbara.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and I currently live in Glendora area, so about 20 minutes outside Pasadena.
And where the fires are right now.
Yes, lots of smoke, lots of ash. Everyone's wearing a mask, doing the thing.
Okay, so I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit personal.
Yes.
Why don't you drink coffee?
Oh my gosh. Whew, I was not expecting that. I guess I've just never really found a need for it. Going through school and stuff, I was always on that green tea, orange juice, water kick, so I never really quite found a need. And I also had some roommates and family members that were like highly addicted to it. So, you know, the like, don't talk to me till I've had my morning cup of coffee. You know, I'm not really about that lifestyle. So I've been able to function for the last 29 years or so without it. So I've been okay.
Okay, all right. We'll go with that. Let's do this. Who's your favorite band?
Ooh, that's hard. Favorite band? Honestly, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay.
For sure. Anthony Kiedis, yes. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters.
A couple of weirdos, but well, that's okay.
Hey, you know, gotta roll with the weirdos.
So Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then second would be Foo Fighters.
I would say Foo Fighters, yes, absolutely. Under Oath, always good. Of Mice and Men, also very good. So, yeah.
Okay, so if you could be a decade, which one would you be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, wow, that's hard. Honestly, probably either between like the 60s and 70s, because you had like great music.
But you can only pick one.
Okay.
60s or 70s.
Okay, I see if we're rolling on this podcast. So, honestly, I'm gonna have to go with the 70s because I'm a disco baby at heart.
Okay.
Bee Gees, Saturday Night Fever.
So 70s.
70s, feeling it all the way.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right, so now we'll get into some more serious stuff. How did you get into psychology or the field of psychology?
So I am currently a licensed social worker, and so that, you know, people hear the word social worker and that means a lot of different things. So I'm a licensed social worker, which means I'm a licensed mental health therapist. So I do therapy with people, and then I also do like community work with people as well. So I got into psychology, social work, kind of mental health land altogether, because I've just always wanted to help people. Ever since I was young, I've just always wanted to help people. And I didn't really know what that looked like, but as I've gotten older, I just really saw the power of listening to people and just seeing, like in our society, everyone's quick to speak, but very few are like very quick to listen. And so I've just found that listening to people has created a lot of healing. And so through that, I kind of discovered psychology, becoming a therapist, and being able to really like listen well and like hold space for people. Yeah.
I think even like how you said the power of listening, because that is a big deal. I think even people in ministry, people in churches, one of the things that we could do, all of us, we could do better is learn how to listen.
Right.
So what's your official title?
My official title is Licensed Clinical Social Worker, LCSW.
And we briefly talked about this before, but you did work in Los Angeles County, maybe, even the city. And so what are some of the areas that you worked in?
So I've worked primarily, like you said, all over LA County, going from all the way from downtown LA all the way to the border of San Bernardino, and then I've done work in San Bernardino itself. So I've worked primarily in community mental health, so patients with severe mental illness, people who are homeless, people who are coming out of jail, people who are really suffering and really need support. I have done that, and I've also worked in the primary care and the medical setting as well.
Okay. And so that is a very big difference from Santa Barbara.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I think we even chatted about it before. There was maybe like, did you ever feel like it was unsafe, or how did you feel about the safety of it? Is it something a little bit scary?
I mean, I think more so as opposed to like, oh, because I'm from Santa Barbara and then transitioning, but I think more so of like, I'm a female walking into Men's Central Prison, Men's Central Jail in LA. Like, that's a very intimidating environment. So it's more so, yeah, definitely that. I mean, I think at times it did feel like, now that I'm older and I have had a lot more experience in the field, I look back and I'm like, oh wow, that maybe wasn't like the safest thing to have done, but
do you have an example? Like,
so for example, when I first started in the field, very young, very excited, wanting to help people. There was a patient whose home I was going to, because a large chunk of my career has been, meeting people in their homes. I think a really important thing of mental health is not only emotionally meeting people where they're at, but physically. So I've done sessions, I sat on a curb outside of a McDonald's and my patient like sat in their car. Or we've both sat, outside at a park bench or different things like that. So I think it's really important to meet the client where they're at. So where a lot of people feel comfortable is in their homes. So I've done a lot of homework. So for example, I had a patient who was an active gang member, and the neighborhood wasn't really the safest. And so he had a huge sliding like metal gate, the kind that's on the tracks, and you gotta like
in his yard, in his front yard.
In his front yard, on the front of the driveway.
Oh, okay. So before you even got to the front door.
Before I even got to the front door.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm a single female. I don't know anyone. No one really knows where I am. I'm just, I'll in my mind, I'm like, hey, my patient's here. Meeting for the first time, let's just go. I want to help the people. I want to help him. And so I go and, he like comes out and, I walk into the gate and he slides the gate shut.
Essentially you're trapped.
Yes.
If he wanted
right. And
there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why you wear good shoes with traction.
Okay.
Good shoes, super important. Fun fact. And so, yeah, so we go into the home, and he had some pretty severe, mental health and also some substance abuse. So, like partway through like our session, he starts saying things of like, I am hearing things that are telling me to, kill you and then kill myself, and so it's like, wow.
So he says this to you after he's closed the gate.
Right.
Did he lock it?
I don't remember. I don't believe so, but it's one of those things that it was like, this is going to take all of my strength to pull the gate open.
Okay.
To slide it down the track to get in.
So essentially you were somewhat like,
yes.
You were there. Like you were
yeah.
there.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Until he opened it.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so he shares this.
Yeah. So he says that, and, it was a moment of like, okay, what do I do? But, I think a huge part of being in mental health and being a therapist is just being calm and maintaining, it's really important to, you don't want to overreact and you don't want to assume, just because someone is saying something, I don't want to assume like, okay, he's saying this, so like he's going to kill me, he's going to do it. But it's just more of like, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about this? I think it's important to be curious, So, hey, so like you're telling me this, like, can you tell me a little bit more? Like,
is that what you told him when
yeah.
he told you it? Can you tell me a little bit more about the voices that want?
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more
Okay.
of what's tell me what's more of your experience right now? Is this like, do you really feel like you like want to kill me, or is it just something that you're like a thought, or you feel like an outside thought is being told to you? Because I think something that's important, that we are not our thoughts. And I think that's something that we forget. Like, just because I have a passive thought, it's like, oh my gosh, that doesn't mean I am my thought. So I think it's important to be curious and be like, okay, like, is this something that's just kind of passing through, or is this something that, that you're really feeling and you want to follow through with?
Yeah.
Because it would be really easy in that moment to be like, okay, he's going to hurt me, life or death. Okay, how do I get out? But it's like, no, like, well, maybe that's not what he actually means. That's not his intent. Maybe that's not his intent. So.
Yeah, and the fact that he shared it with you is interesting. Like,
right.
So let me back up for a little bit. You are a Christian.
Yes.
So you what we define believer, follower of Jesus.
Yes.
And you grew up in church, correct?
Yes.
So you have a pretty solid understanding of the Bible and Christianity, what it means to follow or pursue Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so I'm saying that because I want to make sure that for those that are listening, that they're aware of like that you're not strictly like someone just has no faith or no belief in Jesus, but that is part of who you are as a person.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, faith is like the most important thing to me.
Okay. Okay, so one of the reasons why I thought it'd be really good to do a podcast with you, Sierra, was I found these stats, and basically there are two things really plaguing a lot of people right now: anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm, and I'm sure you've read multiple things on it, but I found these stats online. I'll read some through, and we can kind of talk about them after. But an estimated 31% of all adults will experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their life. Mm-hmm. An estimated 19% of adults in America had an anxiety disorder as of 2001, 2003. Mm-hmm. Anxiety disorders are more prevalent in women than in men in the United States and around the world. Mm-hmm. So I found this one, it was from a study done in 2017 and 2018. Mm-hmm. Specific phobias are the most commonly occurring anxiety disorder, affecting more than 19 million adults in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So reading some of these stats, I also found some world stuff. It is estimated that 264 million adults around the globe have anxiety. Mm-hmm. I found these ones for specifically the U.S., and it was really interesting because it says that nearly 1/3, or 31.9% of adolescents, that would be ages 13 through 18, had an anxiety disorder between 2001 and 2004. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was kind of like, whoa, I didn't know that, teenagers that are that young would have this kind of symptom or presentation of anxiety in their lives at such an early age. Mm-hmm. And then 30 to 44-year-olds were most affected by anxiety disorders as of 2017. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because 30 to 44, that's your age when it's like you're kind of established in life, so to speak. Mm-hmm. In your early 20s, you're in college or you're leaving home, you're getting to like a career or whatever you're doing. And then once you're in the 30 to 44 year range, I feel like you're more like established. You usually have a family at that point, little kids, maybe buying your home or something like that. And so I feel like, man, like to see this is kind of interesting because it points to something, for me at least, that a lot of us, if we're dealing with issues and we have like a young family and we don't address the issues, I think it causes a lot more issues. And so it's interesting in all this, but this is one interesting that I read that I was like, Americans with higher education are less likely to have an anxiety disorder. Now, when I read that, I was like, I don't know if that's like factual 100%, but I think it's just more offensive because it's like, because especially being like, I'm a Latino, and for the people that can't see us, Sierra's not.
I'm white, Caucasian.
So Americans with higher education are less likely to have an anxiety disorder, and as a Latino from our community, there's less education. So what we can kind of like assume pretty safely is that there's a lot more anxiety in like the Latino or Hispanic communities. And so, and I would say this, I think I know people, more Latinos, especially the guys that deal with it or have it, but don't deal with it.
Right. And I think, and I think something that's interesting, that's an important factor, in talking about mental health is also talking about culture. You know, because different cultures have different perspectives or different thoughts on mental health. You know, that, you know, maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe it's some cultures, like I said, you know, it's not something that exists, or it's something that is really important to focus on. So I think looking at culture and, you know, cultural dynamics are important as well.
So I want to kind of dive in a little bit further too. So I brought up anxiety and depression, but let's talk about anxiety specifically.
Yeah.
Maybe you can elaborate and just like help, number one, like me understand, but also those that are listening, like what is anxiety and what does that word even like cover?
Right. So anxiety is, you know, I think it can be, anxiety is something, you know, in mental health itself has become something that has been a lot more accepted. The conversation about mental health, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago was something we didn't talk about as a society. But, you know, the topic of mental health has definitely been something that's been more accepted, and something that, you know, that people are more open and sharing about. You know, it's no longer really taboo as much to say, hey, like, I'm going to therapy right now. You know, maybe 5-10 years ago, you know, people were really hesitant to share about that. So anxiety itself is kind of like a blanket term. So looking at it from a clinical perspective, you know, to educate, to give like science and to give like education instead of just kind of like pop culture science. So there's something called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual.
Wait, let me stop real fast. Let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Pop culture science.
Yes.
Elaborate on that.
Pop culture science. Oh my gosh. So pop culture science is something that's like, I mean, you know, like when you go on social media and you read like, you know, this like inspiring like catchphrase or something that's like, oh, okay, like, well, like, where does that come from? Where does that mean? You know, sometimes we take things off, like, you know, we see things on TV, or we hear something from a family member or different things like that. And it can be, comes, like, we don't really know kind of where it comes from. It's just like,
so we just heard it.
We've just heard it. Just this pop culture kind of vague thing. We don't really, it's like, oh, like, I just heard that somewhere. But we don't really think about like, oh, like, where did that come from? Is that actual fact? Like, is that science?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So that's what I mean.
As you were explaining, go ahead.
Yeah. So, so mental health, there's something called the DSMs, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And basically what that is it's a book. And it basically is all kind of the mental health disorders, you know, that a licensed therapist or a doctor or a medical professional can diagnose someone with. So, you know, I think a huge part, you know, of importance in this podcast is making sure that we're talking about science. We're talking about, you know, things that research and things that, you know, science has proven, as opposed to just this kind of like pop culture.
Okay.
Because that's important to me, is, you know, that as we're talking, that people feel educated and equipped based in fact, as opposed to just this blanket like, oh, you know, like, I heard this somewhere, or I heard this like on Instagram or something like that. But it's like, well, I don't really know if that's like valid or if that's true or not. I want to make sure that what I'm talking about and what we're sharing is coming like from like a valid source. So anxiety is kind of a blanket term. It's like an umbrella if you kind of think about it, you know. And there's five things under that blanket term of anxiety. So you said, so one of the stats that you read, is you said the biggest form of anxiety is some form of like phobia disorder. And so a phobia is kind of under that umbrella of anxiety. So the things that are under the anxiety umbrella are generalized anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and social anxiety disorder. So for this conversation, I'm going to stick to kind of just generalized anxiety disorder. So this is more so, you know, just the general anxiety and anxiousness that, you know, people feel. It's not something specific regarding a specific phobia. or social situation, or different things like that, but just kind of the generalized.
But if you wanted to dig deeper, you could actually go specifically to each of the 5 areas and specifically talk about them in depth. Okay.
Absolutely.
So generalized anxiety disorder, and kind of like bringing in the thought of like, because of the pandemic, because of the coronavirus and all these things, I'm not sure if there's like factual evidence, but I think just the idea that the stuff I've been reading, it seems like there has been a jump of
absolutely.
people with anxiety.
Oh yeah.
So, and even with like the areas of like those who maybe lost their job, they can't make rent, the idea of eviction or losing wherever they're living. And so in general anxiety disorder, is this something that is kind of within that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. I would say so. And that's very valid to feel, like with the coronavirus and just the uncertainty, and we've never had a pandemic like this happen before. So because we don't know what it is or what's happening or what's going to happen in the next month, 2 months, 6 months, it's normal that it's going to create some feelings of anxiety. So it's I just want to validate for people that if you are feeling anxious, that's in response, that's okay to feel anxious. That's a normal feeling to what is happening right now.
Now, kind of jumping back to the idea of what you mentioned, pop culture science. There was this post from, it was on Instagram. I believe we can say the name without any copyright issues, but it was Humans of New York, and in it, it was a daughter talking about her father. And she explained that how her dad would basically just back her up and help her whatever she could do. And in this one part, he says this, or she said this: whenever I was feeling unsure, he'd bet me $1. As my anxiety got worse, he studied psychology. He'd walk me through coping strategies. He'd say things like, "Are you catastrophizing this? Have you ever failed a class before? What evidence do you have that this time will be different?" I hated being the emotional one. And she goes on to explain, how her dad was very supportive in everything she did. But my question would be this. So you mentioned the DSM-5, and then you talk about like pop culture science. But here you have someone whose dad, it seems like he attempted to study psychology to help his daughter.
Right.
So if I'm his dad, I'm trying to help my daughter. Is it a negative thing for me to go out and buy a DSM-5 and basically try to find, what's going on with my daughter? Is, she's obviously suffering some sort of anxiety. Is it wrong for me to go buy this book and just try to define it myself? Would you recommend that?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say it'd be a bad thing to like go, because you can order a DSM like on Amazon. Like it wouldn't be bad to go and like buy it, because sure, yes, it would definitely, bring education and that type of stuff, but the book isn't something that offers like coping strategies of how to do it. It helps label and put things to be like, oh, okay, like this is what anxiety is, based on like fact and, and science, but it's not something that is like, oh, if I go pick up this book, this is going to teach me like coping strategies. So that's why, seeing a therapist or, some sort of like mental health professional is helpful, because they're kind of the middleman.
Right.
They've been trained in the DSM, as a therapist, I've studied the DSM. I know what the criteria and what anxiety looks like. So I'm able to teach someone, hey, like, this is what it is. This is what it looks like. You meet the criteria for it, but let's also talk about how we can help you. Yeah.
So it's almost like going, so you have a car and you buy the owner's manual for the car, right, but you're not a mechanic.
Exactly.
So it'd be best to go to the mechanic,
right,
which in this case would be like a therapist,
right,
to say like, hey, can you help me with this stuff?
Right. And I mean, just like, there's nothing wrong with buying the car manual and reading for yourself, educating for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm all about that. But it's also helpful, too, to have someone who, has, like, a mechanic, like, spent a lot of time in this and done this to help kind of translate for you what's happening and what's going on.
So generalized anxiety disorder, what does that look like?
So according to the DSM, there's a couple criteria. So basically excessive worry, occurring more days than not. So more days out of the week than not, for about 6 months or so. So that's one criteria. Another part is having difficulty being able to control it. So it's something that, you feel out of control with, that's not something you're able to kind of tame down for yourself.
So is it the feeling of feeling out of control, or is it not being able to control the worry?
I would say not being able to control the worry. And then, so, to be diagnosed, so the anxiety and worry are associated with 3 or more of the following symptoms, and these have to be for 6 months. So feelings of restlessness, so feeling keyed up or feeling on edge, finding it hard to just like relax, being easily fatigued, because, when, it's just like, your body can only handle so much, right? So like when you go exercise for a long time, your body's geared up because we're constantly using our muscles, where our cortisol is being, is coursing through our brain and through our body. So eventually we crash. So we just get tired really easily. Or difficulty concentrating on something. So focusing, so difficulty, watching TV or reading a book, or just finding that, your mind kind of goes blank, and maybe you feel a little bit like paralyzed in the situation of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. I'm just stuck here. The feelings of feeling stuck, feeling very irritable, or really easily agitated. Just something really small can just kind of set you off because you're kind of feeling on edge, right? It's like you're feeling keyed up, so just the littlest thing can kind of you knock you off. Muscle tension is another thing. So we carry a lot of stress in our shoulders, or even something as simple of we clench our fists sometimes, or we're just we just kind of shrug our shoulders up, trying to feel like a safety thing. And then finally, some form of sleep disturbance. So difficulty sleeping, having trouble falling asleep, having trouble staying asleep, waking up constantly through the night, feeling restless. And then, and the thing is what's important is, because someone listening to this may be like, I feel all of these things, because, at times I feel all of these things, right? But the thing is it's important is, how much are these symptoms impairing your life? Are they keeping you from going to work? Are they keeping you from spending time with your family or having relationships? It's important to assess and talk, with a professional of how much is this impairing my life? And then it's also making sure that, these symptoms, that they're not a result of substance abuse.
Right.
You're not drinking, or you're not, it's not a result of another medical condition, or, some sort of, like I said, substance abuse or outside thing like that. So those are the big criteria.
It might be also a good place to say that this isn't a professional assessment.
Right. Oh,
through
totally.
A podcast.
Absolutely.
It's just, we're having conversation on anxiety.
Right.
And kind of going over what it is, what it isn't.
Right.
And so just for those of you listening.
Right.
It's not a diagnosis of anxiety.
Yes. This is not me reading the DSM being okay, that social worker on that, one podcast, I meet all these things, so I have anxiety. But it's just more of me, bringing in, fact and science, to this, to bring education to people, as opposed to just someone going to Googling what is anxiety, and then some random article pops up, and it's well, I don't really know where that comes from. If this is valid, can I trust this? Can I not trust this?
Right.
So I want to make sure that I'm bringing, real education to people.
So in the overall picture of it, anxiety in itself, have you seen it be really destructive to someone's life?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you give me an example? Because I would say this, is there such a thing as functional anxiety?
Yeah.
Where, you know what I mean? Where people can kind of just keep going on with life, and
right.
It's just the way it is. I feel anxious, so.
Right. Because one of the things is like I said, is how much does this impair your life?
Okay.
Right. So if you think of it kind of like a sliding scale, because someone may feel anxious, but they may still, be able to go to work, and then, go to work, have social relationships, and and they find things that help with their anxiety, like they maybe do some meditation or they exercise, different things like that, and then there's things, and it slides all the way to a scale of someone, like they may feel so anxious that they find it hard to go to work. They might find it hard to leave their home. They might find it hard to spend time with family and friends. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it can be kind of in a scale. So so someone can have anxiety, and be functioning, but then also, someone may be struggling with anxiety that it's harder for them to, continue in the life that they have had.
Okay, so we learned about kind of like what anxiety is. We know that there's 5 areas of anxiety. Generalized anxiety disorder, which we're discussing today. Mm-hmm. There's also OCD, panic, PTSD, social anxiety disorder. But as far as generalized anxiety disorder, there's probably the question of what it is, and we already talked about that. Mm-hmm. But I think a big question would be, where does it come from? Like, what brings on anxiety?